Hello, and thank you for joining us. I'm excited to be here today to interview three of our authors from the third book in the Changing Work Collective series entitled Are We Friends or Coworkers? Exploring Relationships at Work, publishing May 30th, 2025. So a warm welcome to our authors, Kevin Franzman, Avery Kennan, and Christine Wenger. Hello, everybody.
Hi, Karen.
Whoa.
My name's Karen Frozio, and I'm serving as our host today. I'm a member of changingwork.org, as well as a contributing author in the second book of the Changing Work Collective series, which was also an Amazon bestseller entitled Leading with Compassion, Cultivating Connection from the Inside Out. And you can find our books on bookshop.org or Amazon. And for anybody listening who might be unfamiliar with the Changing Work Collective, we're an online community of individuals who are committed to conscious business practices and changing work from the inside out. So I live in Atlantic Beach, Florida, and I'm the founder of Revive Joy, where I have the pleasure of working with individuals and organizations to ensure that everyone, from individual contributors to team members to executive leadership, has the tools that they need to thrive both personally and professionally without burning out, to support the corporate mission. So after 30 plus years in senior leadership roles across corporate America, I have really come to realize that the heartbeat of any workplace is its relationships. Titles and systems and strategies really do make a difference, of course, but it's those everyday interactions, it's the trust that we build, and really the way that we show up for one another that truly drives success. So being intentional about how we connect isn't optional anymore. It's really foundational. And that's what drew me to this book and why I'm really excited to help bring this conversation to life today. So let's start with some introductions from our esteemed group of panelists from book number 3. This is 3 of the authors of the 24 contributing authors that are here with us today. So again, Avery, Christine, and Kevin, thank you all for being here today. And Avery, let's start with you. Your chapter, number 6, is titled Vulnerability, the Medicine for Connection. Can you tell us about yourself and what inspired you to contribute a chapter to this book?
Yeah, thank you, Karen.
Mm-hmm.
Everyone. So my background is in leadership development, and I've been in that field of work for the past 15 years and was working in a corporate role and completely burnt out of the work and just found myself in the hamster wheel of like, what am I doing with my life? And sent me on a different path of exploring mindfulness and the inner work of leadership. And so I joined an organization called Search Inside Yourself. And when I joined, I was really wrestling with this topic of vulnerability and how to be my full self at work and take off the mask and not do the things that lead to burnout, like putting on the mask and not being ourselves. And so my chapter is a lot about that, that time in life, and also just the practices and routines, rituals, everyday experiences of sharing ourselves more fully and being more vulnerable so that we can make friends at work and have more meaningful lives.
Meaningful lives are good.
Yes.
Thank you. I look forward to hearing more about that. Christine, you wrote chapter number 7, titled Building My Home. Can you please tell us about yourself and what inspired you to write a chapter in Are We Friends or Coworkers?
Yeah, Karen, I think one of the things that really inspired me about writing this was the major life change. I had a relocation for the company I was working for from one state to another. And it really, I don't know where I got that notion that for me, work and personal life was separate, but through that relocation and purchasing my first home in my 40s, was life-changing and understanding how impactful it was to create those connections in that community at work that helped me through that major transition period. And now it's changed how I lead teams and how I work in teams as well. And so I'm excited to kind of share some of that as we move forward.
Wonderful, thank you. So Kevin, before we dive into your chapter, The Broken Shield, which is chapter 15 in the book, can you please introduce yourself and share what inspired you to be a part of this book project?
Sure, thanks. So my background is in software engineering. I've got about 10 years in the field and several years as a software engineering manager. But during my time in corporate, I experienced some, as they say, toxic business practices, and they sort of directly affected me losing my job. So through, diving into LinkedIn and whatnot, I discovered changing work and they really inspired me with the movement they're pushing forward. And so I started volunteering and seeing, ways I could help out. And I thought about maybe I could write like a post on their blog about my experience. And so I started writing about it and sort of realized like how well it fit the theme of the upcoming book. I started realizing that, you know, in my experience, I was really questioning whether I like was friends like I thought I was with people I worked with, and can I really be friends? And so I decided to try to explore that a little deeper, and it sort of led into this chapter that I was able to luckily incorporate into this book.
Thank you. All right, well, you've whet our appetite, so we'll delve a little deeper into each of these chapters. So, Avery, in your chapter, you refer to a professional mask that is sometimes put on at work, that there's an outside of work person and an at work person. Can you tell us a little bit more about that?
Absolutely. Yeah, I don't know if others have experienced this, but in my journey, I know I've been a certain person at work and a certain person at home, and those two people sometimes didn't blend in the past. So kind of be professional, say the right things, do the right things, like don't show your sweat kind of at work, and then, go home and get to be silly and dance in the kitchen and, all of the things that make us human and the human experience. And so the chapter really talks about how can we bring our full self or just drop the mask in general so that we get to show up fully. And by doing that, it allows other people to do that too and to feel that kind of sense of like collective exhale and like, okay, I get to be myself here. And that feels liberating and free. And we can actually create a lot more together when we get to be our full selves and be more innovative. So yeah, I don't know if that answers your question.
Yeah, it does. It's a shame, isn't it? I mean, that's sort of the norm, that at home person and the at work person. And so that encouraging vulnerability where people can be authentic, it builds those deep relationships. I think you mentioned where team members are then committed to each other and to the corporate mission, right?
Yeah, yeah. If we don't have to pretend, it takes a lot less energy and we get to just enjoy life and do good work together, which I think we all are wanting. So, yeah.
It's funny, we get hired or we go to get a job based on who we are, and then we often work hard to hide who we are.
So true. So
Christine, in your chapter, I recall you referred to the vast number of hours that we spend at work, and that we often spend more waking hours at work than we do with our family and friends outside of work. So you emphasized the importance of investing in a relational infrastructure rather than just individual output. Can you tell us a little
Mhm.
bit more about that?
Yeah, I think what was so interesting, and it kind of ties into what everyone was just talking about, is how to bring both sides of yourself to work. And the research, when I came across it, is like, by the way, we spend an exorbitant amount of hours with people at work. And even more than your family, if you start, adding it up, in a given day. And, how do you move from a casual friend to a closer friend is actually hours and time. And so if you're just casually in a meeting with someone and you don't really have that interaction, it's taking you, you might get minutes. And what we know is in order to get to advanced stage, you need like 200 hours to really be considered a close friend. And so spending time from uh, looking at it from a leader perspective, what can we put into place to actually accelerate that within teams can be impactful. You can help foster that connection, foster that building of community within your teams to really elevate that and allow them to bring their whole selves to work, but still get the work done. I'm still in corporate, we still, and everywhere we're at, whether you're in corporate or not, you still have to get work done. You still have to deliver some sort of output. But how can we do it in a human way, but also creating that element of connection that maybe makes this fuel faster?
You also mentioned a scarcity mindset versus an abundance mindset. What
Yeah,
did
so
you
I've been
mean
in
by that?
so I've been in organizations, right, where you build a team and you're like, I want to keep my team for me. And sometimes that fuels it, or I don't have enough people to get the work done. We are, with so much change and budget cuts that happen across organizations, we have to look at it. We have, one person to do a job of 10, it feels like. And so we develop this scarcity mindset of keeping it close versus can I partner? How can I help not only this individual foster their development, their connection, but can I work with others, even if they don't report to me, create small teams and really fuel that can help us do more with, frankly, less.
Yeah, you really emphasized that we should be focusing on that mutual connection and common goal. Then rather than considering where somebody is that would make them a friend or not, you suggest that it's that mutual connection and common goal, and that really
Mhm.
resonated with
Yeah,
me.
and it's looking at that. I think we are geared in many cases to find where we are different from people. But when you start looking at how we are all similar, it can be, as big as we're human, just like me, right? I want to be happy. I want to be safe. I want to contribute. I want to do good work. And find those common grounds that help remove the barriers that create friction for decision making or accomplishing goals.
Thank you. Kevin, in your chapter, you explore the question of whether or not the current state of the workplace environment, and you mentioned it in your introduction today too, whether or not the current state of the workplace environment really allows us to be friends. Can you expand on that for us a little bit?
Yeah, sure. And actually to bring back what you were saying, Christine, about like the scarcity mindset, I feel like with the current corporate world, a lot of people are like in fear of being in scarcity. They're gonna lose their job, their ability to support their family, things like that. And it motivates their actions at work. And so at times you might like think you're friends with somebody at work and you really would be under normal circumstances, but somebody might not treat you in the best way, and it's not because there's malice toward you or they're a bad person or things like that, but they're just scared for themselves. They're worried about that if they don't put the blame onto you, then that's going to be their head on the chopping block. And then now I've got a new kid or I've got a new mortgage, and how am I going to pay for that? And so they make decisions they wouldn't want to make. They hurt people that they would call their friends, but because they're sort of forced to in these situations, which is quite a shame. But hopefully we can change that.
So is 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 your stance kind of that the work environment itself can have a detrimental effect on friendships? That what the structure of work or the requirements of the work environment sometimes can put a strain on those friendships?
Yeah, definitely.
Mhm.
For instance, if people started out the same level at the company and then someone is now someone else's boss, that could create like this struggle because now there's this different power dynamic that in sort of traditional corporate culture you sort of have to act a certain way. And so yeah, I think it can be difficult to either really maintain friendships or at least think of them in the same way that you do outside of work. It might be you're still friends, but it's a different type of friendship perhaps at the company that we have now. Um, and it just sort of I feel like it takes looking at your relationships with people at work through a different lens.
Mm.
And factor in all of those, possible negative influences that might be affecting your relationships.
I remember in your chapter, I was inspired to hear your commitment. Believe you phrase it as bringing more compassionate understanding into your sphere of influence. I really like that because we can't do everything for everyone or necessarily change the world today, but we can make a difference today, right? For within our sphere of influence.
Yeah, exactly. Like, I mean, it's unfortunate sort of the overall state, but if we each within our own little sphere, if we start to be more compassionate, if we start to try to do things thinking about, people as a whole human being and not just a cog in the wheel and the or a wheel of cog, whatever, that we might be able to sort of continue to affect them in a positive way. They can then spread that and affect people in a positive way, and we'll just sort of start to grow to a more compassionate corporate culture overall.
Right, wonderful. Before we move on with the different type of question, do any of you want to comment on anything that each of you have said about your chapter or the topics that we've discussed
I
thus
think what
far?
you have is, what I liked is we're hearing like, how do we bring our full selves to work? So Avery kind of opened with that a little bit. Kevin's like, how do we do that in a compassionate way so that we give grace for some of the tensions that do get created just through the structures that a work environment brings, but how do we look at it slightly different to make a difference for our sphere? It was interesting just listening.
And I love too that you, Christine, brought in the human connection piece of like being able to find a commonality with other people in those moments of like at the very lowest common or highest common denominator is just like we're both human and we're both going through this. And so I love that you brought that piece in too.
Yeah, and I just also want to say that, talking about bringing your true self and being vulnerable, like we talk about, some negatives. It's like companies just see us as a resource and not as people. But if we're more vulnerable and authentic about who we are and show them that we are humans and people, it might help us all to treat each other that way.
We definitely have to be proactive, don't we? And intentional about that. It doesn't just happen.
Mhm.
Mhm. All right, well, I'm curious, Avery, how do you hope that your chapter will influence the reader's behavior or mindset in their own workplace relationships?
Ooh, good question. I kind of was seeing it as both like bottom up and top down inside organizations of, for individual contributors who are joining meetings, like taking small moments of courage around vulnerability and being able to speak up or say, you know what, that doesn't resonate or that doesn't land, or I don't think this strategy is going to work, or, whatever it is, or showing up to a meeting and just saying, I'm tired today, or, whatever the thing is. So for individuals, but then also for leaders inside organizations and managers, I think there's a real opportunity to build in systems and structures that create more vulnerability for that connection, like Christine was talking about, of how much time we're spending together at work, to be able to have those little moments of routines and practices and rituals to be able to practice vulnerability together as a team, to get to more of that human to human connection. So that's my hope and desire with the chapter. Yeah.
That's wonderful. Christine, what takeaway do you hope that sticks with readers as they reflect on their own workplace dynamics?
It's interesting. I think it's through this world of now what feels like constant change that's coming at us all the time. I was looking at it as how could human connection create this resilience as we're all going through change. And when I first started the story, it kind of started in one way, and where I evolved to, I mean, because I always thought personal, professional, separate. And I don't know where I got that notion, but through, as I said, a company relocation and noticing how, when you do understand others and what's happening, how can I redefine my definition of what a friend is? And, I think I used to always say, well, a friend is someone that I have to get together with outside of work. And I think we can look at this in a different definition, which is I'm willing to get in the trenches with you, right? So through the ups, the downs, and whether that's only inside an office or that it is outside an office or both, you have that way to build resilience and how leaders can really help contribute to that. And that was something I think is challenging people to think of. How do you think of your own friendships and what is the definition of that versus how you think of a coworker? Because we always talk to our friends differently than we do ourselves, just a stranger.
Nice. Thank you. Kevin, if a reader were to carry one small shift or insight from your chapter into their next work day, what would you want it to be and why?
I think what I'd like is so like my story was, a tale of something, negative happening at work. And for me and possibly for other people can sort of hold on to some like anger from that, negative experience. And so I hope that people who maybe also had a negative experience at work can sort of read my chapter, feel some amount of catharsis from it, feel like they're maybe not alone in, wanting to be compassionate at work and maybe not feeling like they're allowed to at their company. And also I'd, like them to take away that, even somebody who's not treating you great at work, they might have their own reasons and struggles, and they want to do right and do well, and to sort of, switch, maybe your perspective on it a little to have some more compassion, because that's not only going to help others, but I think it's going to help you as well. Like I know it helped me to
Mhm.
take somebody who maybe didn't treat me so great and think about it from their point of view helped me let go of some of like the anger and hard feelings I had. So that's something I hope some people can take away.
That's great.
Kevin,
Yeah, and
I want to
somebody has to
jump in
take that
there
for,
real
sorry,
quick.
go
I love,
ahead.
Kevin, what you said is a reminder that, we don't go into work saying, I want to be angry today.
Mhm.
Or I don't go into work saying, I want to be mean to this person today, right? The similarities that we talk about is like, wait, no, we all want to show up and do good work and add value. That's actually what we have in common. It just might have come across in a different way, or my perspective might be different from yours. So I really,
Yeah.
hearing you, yeah, we don't think that way,
Yeah,
even if
definitely like
that's
you
how it
said.
happens, right?
Yeah, definitely like you were saying, there's definitely more commonalities we have than
Mhm.
differences in most cases.
Somebody has to take that first step sometimes to change the environment, right?
Mhm.
Mhm.
To change the norm. Yeah.
Yeah, I'm
It's really
really
meaningful to hear all of your perspectives, and what's really standing out is how all three of your chapters in their own way highlight that power of connection and trust and communication. Because you've each offered some really vulnerable, honest looks at how we move beyond that surface level, right? Like those labels, instead of friend or coworker, we can move into those deeper, more collaborative human workplace dynamics. It's a really beautiful reminder, I think, that at the heart of every organization are the people doing their best to belong, to contribute, and to grow together. So I'm curious, and this is a question for all of you. Why do you think that this book topic resonates now? What is it about today's work culture that makes the question of friends or coworkers so timely?
I have one thought.
Mhm.
Sort of Christine, what you were saying about sort of redefining what it means to be friends and, it possibly being get together outside of work, that type of thing. I think a lot of us work remotely, and so you can't really get together with people outside of work. But that doesn't mean you can't be friends, That doesn't mean that you can't have an opportunity for that. It's just a different, approach to it to be able to still uh create friendships and that are really meaningful, but you can still do it, virtually.
makes
Yes,
me
very much. As long as you're not going to give me a 3-hour happy hour like we did during COVID, please.
Yeah.
But we can be friends in so many other ways than doing that. Or, and I say a virtual happy hour. That's a very different case, right?
Right.
It's way too long. It makes me think too about what you were sharing, Kevin, around just the loneliness epidemic that we're in right now, and how, like loneliness, they've done studies where like loneliness is like more harmful than smoking a bunch of cigarettes. It's
Mhm.
like there's a lot of data and research out there about yeah, just the what we're experiencing when it comes to feeling alone or being alone, or like you talked about, Kevin, like making sure that people know that they're not alone. And so I think this topic of friendship at work is really important, both the remote piece and just like we're all searching for meaning and purpose and connection in our lives and want to live our lives, and at the end of it be like, okay, that I hopefully made a difference in some small way and had some great memories. And because we spend so much time at work, this is the place to do it alongside every other place of our lives. So yeah, that's what comes up for
I think
me.
it resonates as well. I don't know about in your circles, but in some of my circles, and we talk about how challenging it is. I'm an empty nester, so how challenging it is to make adult friendships. Because when I had children at home, you make friends through their activities or their structure around school or sports or this, and you start to make friends that way. The way we make friends as an adult without children or with in different environments changes and evolves. Or I have more free time. So how do you find that space to do it? So I think that's one of the other reasons it lands now is redefining what it does mean to create friendships, and how could we do that in a, more unique way?
Great, thank you all. So from a writing process perspective, I'm curious about each of your experiences in the writing of the chapter, and what was one of the biggest takeaways for you in this experience? So I think we'll start with Avery this time.
Yeah, sure. I um I at first I said like like wholehearted yes, like I'm in for this project. This sounds amazing. I'm so excited to like start writing. And then I started to write the first chapter, and when the first draft was due, I was like, I have nothing to write. Like I don't know anything about friendship or vulnerability. Like nothing was coming up. And I just remember throughout the process, Lisa, who is the editor, was saying like, trust the process, trust the process. And I was like, I can't trust the process, like nothing's coming. And then eventually like ideas started to come in the shower and while I was driving, and I was like, okay, there is something to contribute here. But it was a really good inner experiment to be able to notice like the stories that are arising and how to work with them and how to really stay with the unknown. Um, and then as I started writing, it got a lot easier, and it actually felt very easy once I had my topic to be able to put it on paper. It felt like a really good flow state. And then the other surprising thing that was interesting was there was like little moments of magic that happened in the writing process. Like as soon as I submitted my first draft, the last part I had to write was like my name at the top of it. And long story short, I've changed my name a couple of times. I've been married, been divorced, and I've had this whole inquiry around like, who am I? What's my name? And for 10 years, every time I say Avery Holden, which is my former married name, there's something inside of me that says like, that's not your name. But I also don't feel like my birth name. I'm not that version of myself either. So then I had this insight that was like, just let it go, just let the name go. And so now I go by Avery Kennan, which is my middle name, and I've just dropped the last name. And I now have to deal with all the paperwork of that, which is not fun. But it was a really powerful moment of something about putting it on print really helped to bring 10 years of an open question to life and to a sense of concreteness. So I'm very grateful for this process, for both the writing and the clarity and the connection and the friendships that it's brought to.
Glad it was a good experience. How about you, Kevin?
Yeah, first off, I want to say that that's amazing that writing this chapter had such an impact that yeah, your name even changed. Like, wow. That's really amazing. I really this process for me was very exploratory, I suppose, because I have never really done like creative writing or like narrative writing or writing for a book before. Um, I've done writing in, essays at school or writing, blog posts or things like that. But this was something quite different. I wasn't sure if I could do it. I wasn't sure if there was some like secrets out there that like I wasn't aware of that I'd like submit my first draft and they'd be like, this isn't like a book, and I missed all the secrets of how to write a book. So it was but I figured I'd see what happened, and yeah, the editor Lisa was very supportive, gave some good tips that I was able to sort of like stretch myself to like write in a little bit more of like an emotional and like figurative way that I'm not really used to. So that was a nice experience, and the like cohort I was in, a couple other fellow authors of the book, we reviewed each other's chapters and they were very supportive and gave some great tips. So it was just a great experience for me to be able to see that like this is something that is possible for somebody who doesn't have any experience in that type of writing before, that it is something that you can do. So yeah.
Yeah, yeah. Putting yourself out there is scary. Great job. Christine, how about you?
Well, I think changing work made it easy, truthfully. I was an author in book one, but that was that was my personal story. I'd kind of been saying that out loud for years. And the reason I decided to do this book was I knew nothing of what I was going to write. And it was a very different type of challenge for me in doing that. I didn't have a preconceived story. Maybe I'm like, I didn't know what I was great. Great. We get one prompt and how do we, go from there? And I wasn't thinking of myself as a writer, but our editor said, um, a writer is a person that writes. And it's as simple as that. And it doesn't mean that you have to write often. It doesn't mean that you have to be a major publisher. It doesn't mean, or, to be a major published author. So it kind of just changed my framing of it. And because what changing work does is make it easy, I'm like, tell me when I can finish, what do I need to do? And you'll take care of the rest. I think it allowed that element of freedom and creativity to just sit down and write. And I had a girlfriend read my chapter just as I was getting ready to submit it. And, she came back and had some very strong emotional reaction to it and was like, wow. And I went, oh, and she didn't do that for that first chapter. So I'm like, well, maybe I got somewhere different in a way by doing this a second time and by the framework I think that changing work gave us. It made it just easy. And it's so much fun to meet fellow authors. Avery, I'm so glad to see you on here. And Kevin, we've exchanged some messages early on within changing work. So it's fun to do this interview with both of you.
Well, thank you. It's obvious that the system setup is working well, and I'm glad it's stretching everybody, but the book speaks for itself with the end result, which is a gem of wisdom from the 24 authors. So quickly before we wrap up, where can those listening today find you if they want to follow or reach out to you? Kevin, we'll start with you.
I suppose you can find me on LinkedIn. Currently I've been, volunteering with Changing Work as their director of technology and community operations. But I'm also sort of looking to get back into the software field and software management. So but I'm also happy to just sort of talk about Changing Work, talk about my experiences in corporate. So feel free to just sort of send me a message on LinkedIn there.
All right. Christine, where can you be found?
So, like Kevin, you can find me on LinkedIn, of course, and then you can also go to rewireandthrivecoaching.com. So there's more information if anybody wants to inquire of some of the work I've done, and we can talk more.
Great. And Avery?
Yeah, same. LinkedIn is a great spot. And then my website, coreconsultingleadership.com. It's also a good spot to find me.
All right. Well, thank you all for sharing your valuable insights today and your powerful contributions to book number 3, Are We Friends or Coworkers? Exploring Relationships at Work, published May 30th, 2025. We are all excited to delve into the full book. And each of your chapters really offer powerful reminders that it's not about choosing between the friends or the colleagues, right? It's about how we engage with one another in meaningful, respectful ways. So when we're building on that trust and recognizing each other's unique contributions and we're working in sync, we're creating those stronger teams and more connected workplace culture, which just sounds wonderful. And that kind of collaboration really makes a difference. And I'm truly hoping that we can all carry that forward into our own workspaces. So for everybody listening today, we invite you to also explore the first 2 best-selling books, Leading with Self-Awareness, Starting from the Inside Out, and Leading with Compassion, Cultivating Connections from the Inside Out. And they're both available on bookshop.org and Amazon. And if this conversation sparks something meaningful to you, we ask that you would consider sharing it with your community or your network. And if you'd like to connect with others on this journey to create a more conscious, human-centered workplaces, then we invite you to learn more about our growing community at changingwork.org. So thank you for being part of the movement to change work from the inside out, and have a wonderful day.